welcome to Pulse by AlphaWire, the podcast where science and education meet cutting-edge technology and artificial intelligence. My name is Aldo, and each week I sit down with innovators, thinkers and doers who are working to change our world for the better. Together we explore their journeys, uncover the lessons they've learned, and take the entrepreneurial pulse that drives them on their path to success. I loved speaking to Cosmo Jiang, General Partner at Pantera Capital, for this episode where you get an investor's outlook on how science and technology have the potential to grow together. Not only looking at its impact on society, but also as year-on-year growing profitable companies. Pantera Capital is one of the biggest hedge funds in the world that solely invests in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology companies. Cosmo is a seasoned investor with a BA in applied mathematics from Harvard, who previously worked for Nova River, Hitchwood Capital, Apollo Global Management, and Evercore Partners. Sincerely, hope you will enjoy this conversation. Yes, and we are live with another interview, and this one is a special one because I have the great honor of being here with Cosmo Jiang, General Partner at Pantera Capital. Very warm welcome to you, Cosmo.
Hey, thanks for having me, Aldo. Excited to be here.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for saying yes to this interview. I know you are very, very busy. Loads of things happening, I can imagine, at Pantera Capital. But I also know you have a special place in your heart for science and education. And, Pantera Capital and you yourself have shown your love for genomes.io, which is the initiative, of course, that I'm the CEO of. But I think there's more to that. And whenever I meet you, we talk a little bit about that. And then I invited you. It's like, well, maybe we should have a slightly deeper conversation around that in a podcast interview. And so here we are. So thank you so much for saying yes. So first of all, for the few people who live under a rock and do not know what Pantera Capital is, can you give us a very, very, very short summary of what it is exactly that you guys are doing?
Of course, thanks for having me. And yes, Genomes has a very special place in my heart and in our investment process. So we're excited to be investors in it. On Pantera, Pantera, for those who don't know us, we're a blockchain-focused investment fund. We've been blockchain dedicated since 2013 when we became the first institutional fund investing in blockchain. At the time, there was nothing except Bitcoin. And so we launched a passive Bitcoin fund that's now at 1500x, which is pretty crazy to think about. Pretty soon thereafter, it became natural for us to start investing in everything that was building around Bitcoin. And so we launched a venture fund. And fast forward to today, we now manage about a little over $5 billion of assets across both private and public market strategies, spanning everything from early stage venture to later stage to public markets, both passive and active. My role is I'm a general partner at Pantera. I lead investment strategy at the firm. And in particular, my day job is thinking about everything in the public markets and guiding our investment research. So that's a little bit on Pantera and us. Part of the reason why I'm excited about science, beyond just being someone who really believes that one of the main purposes of capitalism in general is to create economic surplus and then use that economic surplus to improve everyone's livelihood through the advancement of science and research. But also because my very real counterpart to that is my wife, who is an MD, PhD. And so she is an extremely dedicated research scientist, biomedical research. And so every day I see her toiling away in the labs and I realize that there's a lot of amazing value being created there and it should be spotlighted more.
Nice. Well, thank you. And thank you to your wife for flying the flag. Yeah, well, let's dive in. So when we're talking blockchain, where do you think blockchain can make a difference in improving science in our world? Of course, you might be preaching to the choir. We might be stating the obvious because as genomes.io, we have concrete ideas. But is that something you guys see as well? Do you see kind of that blockchain has a sustainable use case to improve science across the board in this world? Not only just looking for a use case, but actually, making it better.
There are a couple things about blockchain technology that are important to focus on and think about as you think about what its impact could be on various industries. The first is this concept that tokens are a new form of incentive mechanism. Right? I think the magic of blockchain, as much as we all think cryptography is cool, it really is not about the underlying cryptography and consensus mechanism. What is more amazing about blockchain is the fact that you do reach consensus in a decentralized way. Or in other words, like if we think about going back to the comment I made earlier about what capitalism has done for humanity, capitalism what has propelled us to be able to create all these amazing innovations over time. And capitalism is all about the coordination of incentives, right? Coordinating a group of actors who maybe would have no other reason to work together to create something even greater. And over time, that's evolved from the early days of tribes to later in the 1600s, people developing equity-based corporations. And so today, that is by far the most common form of coordinated capitalism and coordinated incentives. I think tokens really offer the next evolution of what that could be, because whereas equity-based corporations are in a lot of ways boxed in by what equities can do largely by geography because of how equities are regulated. Tokens are really interesting because they're an internet native form of capitalism. They're an internet native way of coordinating incentives. So tokens are, in many ways, can be used like equity, but way better because they're global, they're permissionless, they're divisible, they can be issued to a whole variety of actors and not just purely your shareholders or token holders. And so in that way, I think blockchain is disrupting capitalism at large, or has the potential to disrupt capitalism at large. And that is one of the biggest things to think about. It's like not how do I use cryptography in a special way, although that's certainly part of it, but how do I use token incentives or coordination of incentives in a really unique way to enable new innovation? And so I think that's one. The other thing about blockchain that I think is really special is this idea of decentralization. Right? And decentralization is valuable for a few reasons. One is it creates accessibility on a global scale. Anyone with a internet connection and a mobile phone can access a blockchain wallet, can access blockchain technology. And so that's very powerful. Whereas in the past, a lot of coordination was done physically or within your community. With blockchain, it's done globally day one. And so with decentralization, it can be done globally day one. And so it's really accessible to everyone day one, but also everyone can interact with it day one, which means point two beyond accessibility is innovation, right? Anyone in the world, again, with an internet connection can contribute to this open source protocol or contribute to a decentralized protocol. And all of a sudden, you're not, talent is not gate kept by traditional structures, but capital or talent can travel globally and be accessed by everyone in a decentralized way. And then the final point is really around resilience. By being decentralized and not centralized, there's no centralized single point of failure. And so you can build much more resilient ecosystems than you could in a centralized way. All these things come at a cost, but all those are real benefits of decentralization that should be appreciated.
Nice. That's wonderfully worded. And I think, definitely from an optimist, or for someone who's, of course, very optimistic for good reasons about decentralized technology, can you think of any room for improvement? Because, of course, what you're saying, and I fully underline and agree with you, but that's not necessarily the execution, right? Right yet. It's more like the theory, what it sounds like on paper and how it should be. And now we're kind of in the midst of it. And have you seen any room for improvement, or have you seen anything that you say, okay, this is going in a completely different direction than I thought it would?
I think one of the really exciting things about investing in early stage venture is that, or early stage technology in general, whether venture or public markets, the thing that you're investing in more so than anything else is the management team and their ability to do what it calls like creating call options, right? The thing that you're pitched day one, especially in early stage venture, is almost definitely not going to be the product that gets scaled and created, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. And so what you're really underwriting is there some semblance of truth to what they're building? Is this team really motivated to make things work kind of no matter what? Are they mentally flexible enough to realize when they need to pivot and do something different? And if so, I think there's a lot of optionality. This management team has the ability to create a lot of call options for themselves and therefore for our capital. And so that's a roundabout way of saying many things don't play out the way that I think they do. It's hard to think of specific examples right now because almost everything turns out slightly differently than you would expect, and sometimes very differently than you expect. Maybe one overarching thing is just the I'd say for a lot of people, the speed of change has sometimes feels slower than they expect, especially when you're in the day to day. Like when all you focus on is blockchain technology and decentralization on a day to day basis, it can feel like as the days, weeks, months pass, that like not a lot has happened. But when I talk to people that are coming to blockchain for the first time, all the institutional investors that we're speaking to and are considering allocations to blockchain for the first time, for them, this is hugely different than what was true even just 3 or 4 years ago, and that there's been a lot of progress. And so it's important to also keep that in mind.
Yeah. No, I recognize what you're saying, and thank you for complimenting the team. I hope as one of, as CEO of one of your portfolio companies, you're also including us in that compliment. So the team part I definitely get. For where you say things turn out differently, I think from our experience or where we feel that sometimes it doesn't feel like our turn yet is where we see that it's too much about the token maybe and too little about the utility. So where we would like to really bring to the forefront the science, at some points we feel that we're sometimes arguing with people who are too interested in the token, if that makes sense, right? So there's the short term profits and the value of, okay, the token doing well on the markets, which has nothing to do with kind of the new type of health reports, genetic testing health reports that we are launching. And it's not like for like, right? If we bring something new to the utility, something that is quite disruptive and quite revolutionary on a scientific level in our market, it's not necessarily appreciated as it would be when we would do something exciting with the token, right? Introducing a new staking program or, I don't know, something else. So it's kind of, for us, it's kind of finding the balance between the two. Whereas, we almost need to be token specialists rather than scientists. So sometimes it's difficult for us to decide on which chair are we going to sit to make this a success in this beautiful world that you've described earlier. So that's a little bit where we find it challenging sometimes, however, not impossible. And I'm happy to say also many people are increasingly becoming more interested in what we do. Do you recognize this maybe also from other companies that people sometimes struggle to kind of talk about their utility and that it's too much on the token?
One of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur in blockchain is this fact that your token has to be public very early. And it's sort of something that's very unique about blockchain relative to traditional venture equity is that in order for a decentralized protocol to be effective, it actually needs to have a publicly traded token. So what ends up happening is that just like Genomes IO, you guys are, I think, have a really great thing at hand, but still very early in your journey. But you have to go public as a seed or Series A stage company. Whereas in traditional venture, and when you're an equity based corporation, you're sort of shielded from that glare for many years until much later when you're much more mature. And that can be very hard to handle. It's very much a double edged sword that can, having a public currency is very powerful because it can accelerate what you're trying to do. But it's also very tough to manage because it's something that you can choose to look at, even though maybe you shouldn't every day, that other people will choose to judge you on, even if it's not very indicative of where you are in the grand scheme of things. Other people, including partners, including potential employees, including existing employees. And so a huge challenge that blockchain entrepreneurs deal with that non-blockchain entrepreneurs don't deal with is the fact that you have this public currency very, very early in your life cycle. I don't envy at all the difficult spot that many blockchain entrepreneurs choose to take when they choose to create a protocol. But man, it can be this incentive mechanism, this token mechanism can be so powerful if you can harness it correctly. It is candidly extremely hard to harness.
Yeah, no, but it is also good marketing. Don't get me wrong. It also brought us a lot of positive things, right? I sometimes feel that I'm defending the token, whereas I have so many beautiful, interesting things to say about the actual product as well. So sometimes it's very hard to decide what comes first because you have such a diverse audience as well, right? So and I think if we wouldn't have that component, I think we would have a lot more of a homogenous audience that would be kind of, looking for one thing, which would be slightly more about the science. And now we've got a very big audience that is interested in a variety of things, and sometimes dominantly more the token. And then we need to kind of say, like, listen, we're in it for the long run. We're about science. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's what we've achieved already thus far, which we're very proud of. And yes, we still have a long way to go. but we're still there and we're resilient and alive and kicking. That's not only to kind of blow my own horn, so to say, but this is just my little experience here. Let's go to kind of course, and you can't talk about technology, and I think also not blockchain technology without talking about AI. And I think we've addressed what you said about the globally accessible idea, the token incentivization, and then you said the globally accessible idea, everyone can get involved with the protocol, and then lastly, the resilient bit. Where do you think AI fits into that framework? So when we're talking decentralized artificial intelligence, I'm right away dubbing it decentralized, but is there such a thing? And if so, how would AI apply to this blockchain work?
Well, let's take a step back. I think philosophically, something that's most exciting about blockchain, the crossover of blockchain and AI, is that the nexus of entrepreneurs that exists at that intersection is actually very rich. When we take a look at our portfolio companies, a lot of our entrepreneurs have AI experience in their background, or AI or stats, as people used to call it. And then when you look at a lot of AI entrepreneurs, a lot of them also have blockchain in their experience. And the reason is because blockchain and statistics or AI are both branches of math. And so anyone that's gone on to advanced studies in math has studied both. There's this natural intersection of talent. I think from a philosophical perspective, AI is all about creating abundance, right? Infinite content, infinite intelligence. Whereas blockchain is all about creating authenticity or verifying authenticity. And so, in many ways, if AI is about abundance and blockchain is about verifying scarcity, they're actually philosophically very tied together, or can be very complementary, or very yin and yang. And so, we're really excited about spending time at the intersection of both AI and blockchain, because it's so clear to us that over the next decade that the two highest growth areas for the economy will be AI and blockchain. I think from from the actual use cases, blockchain is not going to solve every problem in the world, and so it's not like blockchain is useful for everything. And we certainly don't advise people to think that blockchain to just throw blockchain on everything. But it can be very effective for very specific use cases, and it goes back to like what makes blockchain unique, right? What are the unique things about blockchain? The first thing is this idea of coordination of incentives as a coordination mechanism. It's so clear that we are in today's world very resource constrained in how we can use AI, whether that's resource constrained from a data perspective, resource constrained from an energy perspective, or from a compute perspective. And so blockchain, there are a bunch of blockchain protocols that are doing really interesting things around aggregating resources, whether it's data, energy, or compute, to then go be used to apply towards AI training or AI models. In the case of Genomes.io, there's an incredible, elegant mechanism for aggregating genomic data. We have other investments in blockchain protocols that are aggregating robot training data, for aggregating multimodal training data, and all these things. So all that I think is really, really interesting that blockchain can uniquely do that perhaps centralized counterparties can't do as well. And compute, there's obviously been a lot of work already in decentralized compute with Render and Akash and all these guys. And that's proven to be very fruitful and in aggregating all this latent compute power that isn't used effectively into these decentralized marketplaces that AI models can access. And then the third area of energy we think is just starting, right? There are so many ways that people are trying to think of innovative ways to incentivize people to be producers of their own energy and to use energy to capture latent energy in other ways. And so we think that could be really interesting use of blockchain. So that's one, is around this coordination of incentives for resources. Another big area that we've thought a lot about is this idea of using training open source models, right? And so one of the investments that we've been really excited about early on is in this protocol called BitTensor, where the whole idea is, if open source researchers historically have never been compensated for their work because it's open source, and so they end up, they still have a wife, kids, bills to pay for, need to buy a house, so they end up going work for big tech, which is fine. But man, what a shame and what a loss for the open source community if all the best innovations are hidden behind closed gates. So BitTensor's thought was, what if instead open source contributors could be compensated for their work? What if they could, by contributing to this open source protocol, be paid? If indeed this open source protocol or these open source models do create value, then what if they could be paid for that value? And what if we coordinate all that through token incentives? And so that's what BitTensor has done, is it created this incredible framework on which many different types of AI labs, AI protocols can create experiments or create products for open source contributors to contribute to. They then go monetize those products, and in that way, and then they can use that monetization to compensate their open source contributors. And so we think that concept is very powerful, and we're starting to see some really great use cases start to pop out.
Nice, yeah, and it's no secret that we're going to launch our own subnet on BitTensor as well, because we were inspired by this idea of decentralized AI and also the open source component. As you also said, the way it works using the resources, so the fact that so many people can contribute to it. For us, when we were talking about vaulting genomic data, which is where we originally started, we say, okay, how does that rhyme with AI? We don't want to create right away an algorithm that just, whereby we essentially open all the vaults and then all of a sudden feed it into an algorithm that we do not know how it works. So open source is the way to go. So you kind of understand how it works and how it is set up. So there's also that level of transparency. And then, of course, we won't ever open these vaults, kind of the genomic data that is vaulted. We will use synthetic genomic data, which is essentially simulated data based on real life human genomic data, but not the real life thing, meaning it doesn't belong to a real life human being out there. So we're not in violation of anyone's privacy or safety. But, and I agree with you, you see so many beautiful use cases and can really take a granular look under the hood and better understand AI. So it's also genuinely accessible for everyone, right? And from there on, you can still commercialize it, right? And I think that many experts around AI, they kind of said that is a way more honest and a lot more scalable way to go than just trying to keep it behind closed gates, as you say, right? Keeping it in an invisible fortress that no one can actually access. Because at some point they will, and I think it's no secret that loads of these AI tools out there, they haven't figured it out yet, specifically not on the safety and privacy of your data. So I think there's still a lot that needs to be fleshed out in kind of the next 2 to 5 years there. This is so great. I wanted to touch very quickly with you. I couldn't help myself, and of course, we've been talking a lot as kind of a part of the investment that you did. But I was also looking at a recent interview you did at CNBC about ETFs. I know it's off our little bit of kind of what we do, but I do know that Pantera is looking at ETFs also as kind of a way to democratize and do more, and kind of believes in that. Could you very briefly comment on that, or talk a little bit about what you guys are doing there at the moment?
In ETFs?
Yes, yeah. So I know there's a Bitcoin ETF and there's Solana ETF and there might be Ether. I don't know exactly how you guys do that, but just the concept of it all, just for people who don't really grasp that, and why I think Pantera is looking at that kind of, and also taking a role explaining that to other people. So,
Absolutely. So the ETFs had tremendous traction from traditional equity investors, which has been really exciting to see. And for those who live in the crypto native world, will think like, why on earth do we need an ETF? It's so easy for me to go on exchange and buy spot. Well, the reality is the majority of capital sits in traditional brokerage accounts, sits at wealth advisors, for whom it's non-trivial to open up a bunch of Coinbase accounts or Binance accounts. And so it's actually one of the things you can do to get people to appreciate your asset is to just lower the friction, right, for them to access it. And that's what ETFs do. They lower the friction and lower the cost for people to get access to crypto exposure. If you have one less account to open, you're that much more likely to then go buy it, right? I imagine having to give all your information and your passport, your ID, your utility information to Coinbase and that's obviously going to stop a lot of people from converting, versus just like, oh, hey, I can buy a Bitcoin ETF in my Fidelity or my Vanguard account. Great, that's super easy. And so that's why we think it's such a big deal as we think about what it takes to scale from a $4 trillion asset class to tens of trillions over time. You have to make it easier for people to get access. You have to meet people where they are, and that's what ETFs do. It meets people where they are. And to our positive surprise, the ETFs had tremendous success, right? The Bitcoin ETFs in aggregate last year took in more capital than the NASDAQ took in. Imagine that. The Bitcoin ETFs took in more inflows than the QQQ, the second largest index in the world, took. That's pretty phenomenal to think about. Impressive. That there's so much pent-up demand for digital asset exposure that just couldn't get it before because it was hard to access. And so that's why we're so excited when the ETFs launched after, and then more recently, the launch of a Solana ETF last week, we think is a really big deal, as well as many other ETFs that we expect to launch over the coming weeks, just for helping provide that access, which is so important to start people getting educated and learn about why blockchain technology is such an amazing opportunity, both from a user perspective, but also from an investor perspective.
Yet another example. Cosmo, thank you so much for your time. I have one last question before I let you go, because I appreciate you have a next meeting. And again, thank you for giving us your time. Actually, it's a build-up of two questions. I hope you don't mind. One is, I'm fascinated by morning rituals. Do you have something when you get up in the morning? Do you have a morning ritual? I know you're an early bird, because when I text you, then, and I know it's early in the morning, you still reply. But do you have a specific morning ritual?
My morning ritual is, and kind of funny is, I wake up almost always before my alarm clock goes, and sort of wake up with, depending on the day, either anxiety or excitement for what's ahead, and immediately, get ready and then walk to my desk and start thinking about the world. And I have about an hour and a half or so before my first child wakes up, and so I try to take that to bang out a lot of things, and then I dedicate half an hour to an hour when my kid first gets up to spend time with them and enjoy the world from his eyes. So
nice.
That's my point.
Getting work out of the way to be a dad uninterrupted. So that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And then my last question, any reading you would recommend? So you're having a fascinating career. You're so much admiration for all the work you're doing. For people who think of like, hey, I would, want to explore kind of or do what Cosmo Jiang is doing. Is there any reading that has inspired you on your way that you would care to share with our listeners?
So because Pantera was the first blockchain asset manager, we feel like we have the responsibility to help educate a lot of people about everything that's going on. And so we actually publish a monthly letter. If you go to panteracapital.com, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, which has just our thoughts of the latest and greatest every month. It's not meant to cover the whole world. It's meant to cover an issue or two at a time. But we take great pride in that role as one of the evangelists for the blockchain industry. And we put a lot of time and thought into our monthly distribution, as well as our occasional webinars and other video interviews that we do to help get that content and the education out there. So please go to panteracapital.com and you can learn more.
Nice. And you're an avid reader of that newsletter yourself?
Yeah, I'm usually the writer of it, so I'm a little bit of promotion here.
Yeah, both. Yeah, no, very well done. We'll put it in the show notes. It's been lovely talking to you, and again, thank you so much for doing this. Cosmo Jiang, General Partner at Pantera Capital. Thanks, Cosmo.
Thanks so much for having me.
You've listened to Pulse by AlphaWire, produced by Natalie Piles and Amela Faisal. With great music, The Optimist, written by Holly Hamill, performed and produced by Aldo. Episodes hosted weekly by me, Aldo the Pup.